And pause.
We are good to go.
All right.
And there we go. Okay, we're all ready.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome.
Okay.
Yep, I'm gonna call the meeting to order at 10:03 a.m. This is a special meeting of the City Council and joint meeting of the Cloverdale Community Development Successor Agency Board of Directors. Do a quick roll call. I see all council members here with the exception of Council Member Morgenstern. And then we'll move into B, council workshop, presentation of city governance, including the structure of the city's government, as well as the roles and responsibilities of mayor, city council, and city manager. Take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry for those technical difficulties.
Not a problem.
Good to be here. You guys have met Jose, or know him, some of you for many years, but we're glad to be here to go over some topics today, general structure of the government, our government, what it means to be a general law city, each of your roles, the city manager's roles, and then talk about our governance manual today. So hopefully we'll keep it engaging. There's two of us, so you don't have to listen to the same person go on and on for 2 hours. But so the agenda today mentioned, we're talking about the structure of the government, talk about the role of the council, the role of the city manager, the role of the mayor. It's not called out here separately on the agenda, but also sort of how those all interact with each other. We'll talk about conduct of the meetings, how our city council meetings are run. And then we'll talk about the council conduct rules and the code of ethics. And throughout this presentation, we're talking a little bit about state law, the municipal code, as well as what our governance manual says, and try to highlight where things are from the governance manual. If you look at the governance manual, 25 pages, give or take, let's say, a whole lot of it is just citing to state law, Brown Act rules, conflict of interest rules, but there are parts of, or the municipal code, but there are parts of it that are unique, that are just in that document that we'll try to touch on.
So, and just real quick, just before kind of we get going, just also wanting Jose Sanchez used to be the city attorney here, so it's great to be back in Cloverdale. But one thing is, it's great that you're doing this, and it's not I know all of you have been to different, kind of league conferences, the different sessions. You've done your AB 1, 2, 3, 4 training. But this is always kind of a nice, let's touch base, let's look at your governance manual. But I also want to applaud the council for really adopting these rules that also are saying, look, we want great governance. We want to have a functional, excellent council that's really doing great for the residents of Cloverdale. So we'll cover a lot of these rules that you also decided as a council apply to us. So just did want to just take a moment to just kind of say this is great. And it wasn't too long ago, I think it was a couple months ago, I was giving a similar presentation to a council that had council members there for several terms. So it's not something like, oh, you're brand new, let me go ahead and should tell you what the law is. This is kind of a nice refresher, and it's a nice, just also a good conversation for council to have.
So, and feel free, of course, to interrupt. Small group, no reason to wait till the end. If you ever have questions, feel free to interrupt. So there's Cloverdale is a general law city. There's 2 types of cities in California: general law cities and charter cities. The general law city has the authority to govern local affairs, local issues, but subject to state laws. So we can adopt any ordinances, any regulations we want, as long as they're not in conflict with those state laws. Most cities are general law cities, probably 80% of them. In contrast, a charter city has the authority to govern municipal affairs, which is basically anything that a court or the legislature, really a court hasn't said is a statewide issue. And the legislature adopts laws that they say are about statewide issues, and oftentimes courts will defer to that. So housing, for example, is in recent years, the legislature has adopted a lot of things about housing that they say, this is an issue of statewide concern, so it applies to everyone, not just general law cities. You become a charter city by having the voters approve that, and it's basically, the charter is almost like a constitution for the city. So charter cities tend to be bigger cities or very old cities that maybe at some point along the way adopted it. I assume Santa Rosa is a charter city, for example. So, and then Cloverdale has the council manager form of government. This is the typical form of government for most cities. I would say probably 98% of cities in the state. There are three types of government you could have. You can have council manager, which is where the council sets the policy, sets high level policy, adopts laws, regulations, but then the manager is really empowered to carry those out and is in charge of the day-to-day operation of the city. You can think about that a little bit as, we have a legislative branch, and that's the city council, and then the city manager is the executive tasked with carrying that out, day to day. There's such a thing as a council administrative form of government where the council is really managing the day-to-day operations of the city, and the administrator is really just handling administrative tasks. But that's, only exists in really tiny, these old gold rush cities that have, 900 people in them. And then there's strong mayor, where the mayor is the person who's the executive. They're deemed to be the executive. They hire and fire staff and that sort of thing. You have to be a charter city to have that, and most charter cities don't even have that. There's probably only, 5 or 6 in the state, like San Francisco, LA, San Jose.
And that's where the mayor, they hold the election.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you could have, that's a great question. You can have a generally elected mayor who doesn't have any extra powers. They just get generally elected. So like Windsor, for example, no extra powers. They're not a strong mayor, but they are the person elected by the whole city to hold that role.
Gotcha.
A strong mayor is the city manager. They're, usually they might have the ability to veto, ordinances that the city council has passed. Sometimes instead of the city manager hiring staff, they're responsible usually for hiring and firing department heads. But it's pretty rare. Only, a handful of very large cities have that.
So in our form of government, who tells the city manager what to do?
So that
Is
council as a whole.
Council,
Yes, the council as a whole provides.
not one individual could go and demand from the city manager, I want this done.
Correct.
Make it happen.
Correct, and we'll talk about that a little later, but right, the council as a whole sets the policy. The council as a whole, passes ordinance, and so the council acts through its majority, through a majority vote. But individual council members can't give policy direction to that.
And maybe go to the next slides, Alex, which really get into that. So that's a great segue of what the role of the council is. And we want to talk about what the role of the council is, what the role of the city manager is as well, just to kind of get a better idea. And I think that question really prompts this slide of the municipal code also is very clear regarding this. And you have your governance manual that I know we have cited here as well. But the role is to set policy. You see the council is, I always say the council is at the top of, like, when you look at the pyramid, right? That the council is up there and you set policy. And then it's kind of, okay, how does that policy get implemented? And we'll talk about it kind of goes down through the city manager, and then staff is under the city manager, except for the city attorney that also gets hired by the council. So really, when you see the council has 2 employees, right? You have your city manager, and then you have your city attorney. And as a council, you set policy, you really kind of, what direction do you want the city to go? And that makes a lot of sense, right? The public, the voters, the residents have wanted you to be here, elected you. You're here representing the residents of Cloverdale. So you're saying this is how our city should go, telling your city manager the direction, and then your city manager ends up implementing it. Of course, the city attorney assists. So just real quick, the slide just kind of has some of the typical What does it mean to set policy? You adopt ordinances, anything you do at the council, right? And it's been brought here. How does the council act? The council acts is usually a majority unless there's like a super majority for certain ordinances, certain votes. But it's really the council as a whole. What does that mean? It's really the majority of the council gives the direction that comes down, not one single person. I think that Alex covered it as far as kind of the role of the individuals, and we'll go because your governance manual does provide like additional responsibilities really for the mayor, but that's more of like at the meetings, there is like agenda setting. We'll cover all of that, but just see yourselves as kind of the council policymakers. The municipal code has a section there that we have cited. The city council and its members shall deal with the administrative services of the city only through the city manager, except for purposes of inquiry. That normally means that as a council member, you may have a question for like somebody in staff. Hey, when was that done? Or hey, when are we gonna go do that? That's fine, it's inquiry, but you couldn't go like, for example, to go like to let's say somebody at the water plant or something, an employee. Hey, I need you to do this, this, and this. That's the city manager's role, right? And as a council, you provide direction to the city manager, but as a whole. What I will say is be careful with the inquiry, the questions, and I always give kind of a presentations to council is, look, there's hey, when did we do this project? There's another way you approach staff and say, hey, I had a question about this pothole, whatever. It's very important that we get this done right away. When is it going to get done? Whoa, like I just had a council member tell me that I need to go do it. So I always say, be cautious sometimes about the way questions. Just just know that you also carry a lot of influence when you ask questions. So that's why the inquiry, I always pause there because that's a big source of, hey, it's also kind of how you ask the question that matters. But the code
Real
is.
quick, Jose.
Yes.
And when it comes to that, when you said water plant, things like that, I know this is a pretty dynamic group here, you know what I mean? And on the inquiry or inquiries, like big projects, well projects and things that's gone through West Yost and all that stuff we've talked about as a council as a whole, as going down there and just observing that project taking place and talking. Is it okay to talk to one of the guys and say, hey, where are we at on this? You know what I mean? Because our water plant guys are rock stars for lack of better terms. They know exactly what's going on. They're going to give you, so you're just inquiring on how is a project moving along, you know what I mean? And also some of the things we have in town is like, there's a lot of folks that have a very good working relationship with a lot of the guys in town. So you're walking around town and, you see something that a citizen has brought to your attention, you know what I mean? And just in conversation, you're mentioning it. Obviously, it goes through city manager. We know that, but
Right.
those conversations do come up, and you're not directing in any way, shape, or form because it has to go to the council as a whole, obviously. You know what I mean, or to a subcommittee if we decide to have one. But yeah, that's how.
No, that's exactly right. That's
Okay.
spot on. I think the way you put it as far as, observing or questions or
Right.
letting somebody know. And I liked also kind of you brought up mayor, which is also very important, is anytime, and this is my advice to every council member always, anytime you feel like, wait, could it be seen as though I'm fighting? I always say, hey, let the city manager know. Hey, heads up, I just saw, Bob, whatever, I just mentioned that there was an issue that came up that I heard about, but I wanted to let you know that way. Then as a city manager, they could say, okay, that is where we want resources to go, or that's not where we want the resources to go because we're tight right now and we have to focus on some other project.
Thank you.
So this is same themes, but just more elaborate language coming out of our governance manual that the elected city council sets the policy and direction, and the city manager handles day-to-day operations and implements council decisions. The council oversees the city manager and city attorney, who both serve at its pleasure. All other staff, including contractors, consultants, ultimately report to the city manager. So same exact thing that's in the municipal code and how the government manual works, but we've incorporated that into the government's manual and expanded it just so it's very clear what the standards are and what the expectations are.
But isn't it interesting that as council members, sometimes the public sees you and goes, why haven't you done anything about this? Hey, why haven't you gone over there? Why didn't you make this happen? But they talk to you sometimes, right? Because it's not to everybody, it's not as clear, right? If you don't know about kind of the structure of government and the way it works. Like I always see like the member you run into at the coffee shop saying, hey, what's going on? Why haven't you gone to go do this? And you gotta explain, well, I did provide that. I provided that information to staff, but it's staff's the one that does so and so. So we also get attention, especially in a smaller city. Everybody knows each other, right? Everybody's kind of holding you accountable for even projects.
And we're coming up on this shortly, but the budget is a major place that the council that sort of direct how it wants resources spent, right? So if you go to the city manager, he might say, we don't have time to do X, Y, and Z or to spend money on that. Like we're a small city and that, and so it's the council's opportunity as part of the budget to say, we want to, dedicate resources to this. We want to put more money into park improvements, or we want to hire someone to do code enforcement, or and stop spending as much time on X or whatever. That's a great opportunity. When the manager comes to you and says, we just don't have the capacity to do that, or we're not going to get it done, for you to bring that up as part of the budget to your fellow council members.
Well, and that's a good one right there. Kind of like you said, kind of a segue into this is exactly, Jose, as you get a lot of people. Cloverdale is, I mean, you can't make it through this time without what's happening here. And I don't think it's hard to explain sometimes. And obviously people go right in and talk to Kevin about that, but a lot of times they don't understand the steps or the time frame that it takes. They mentioned it, and in their mind, it's tomorrow morning you're working on it. They don't, so the steps to get to that are tough. So, that's a lot of the, we go in and sit with the city manager, and not every time do we get I'm not coming out of there satisfied, believe me, but you know what? It's part of the game, and I kind of understand that.
And I think, I think Parks is a good example, because that was a concern a lot of the council members had for a while, and there just wasn't capacity to do it, and more staffing was put towards doing that so that we could improve parks and maintenance staff, because
exactly,
that's what needs to be done. And the city manager working with the council decides that to make that adjustment. So just briefly to touch on committees, the municipal code, we have committees, although we're maybe changing based on recent conversations, how often they're used. So more of these discussions happen at the council level. But in the municipal code, their purpose is established as existing to support city management and to assist the council in carrying out its responsibilities. So the committees aren't decision makers, right? They can't adopt ordinances, they can't approve budget amendments, but staff in its day-to-day operations, sometimes wants a second set of eyes on something, wants feedback on something. And so it takes it to a committee. That's how they've been used, historically. And historically the city had a two-touch rule, that anything that was going to the council would go to the committee first. But going forward, but when we start to use these a little less or a lot less, this is still the role they're playing, but on these major issues, when the council decides, okay, this is a topic we want to send to a committee to get it, fleshed out a little bit before you come back with a policy.
And with the committees, and I know that this was in discussions years and years and years back, constant about committees. The only caution with committees sometimes that they're advisory. And a lot of times you could get the council saying, why haven't we seen this as a council? Why are things being done at the committee level, and the council as a whole is not providing direction? And that's why it's more of kind of the assist, the recommendations, or the assist to staff. So just having that balance of recognizing when is it When are they actually taking action to being careful with those things? Okay, maybe I'll kind of kick this one off, Alex. So the city manager is the chief executive of the city. We talked about this already. But this one just points out your municipal code. Your municipal code, similar to all like the rest of the city's municipal code, they usually have a section on your city manager and what roles and responsibilities, what are they responsible for? And this one just your municipal code, just like others, it's the head of the government of the city under the direction and control of the city council. There's usually contract purchasing authority here. It's the up to $50,000 for contracts that don't need to go to the council. They could be done by city manager. But they're also they're the head of staff, right? Staff goes to them. So when you think about kind of who's the boss of staff, it's your city manager, and then the city manager has to report to the council. So it's just, we talked about that dynamic, just being very careful of really kind of also always understanding staff reports to the city manager. The city manager has that's their responsibility. And then that also, as you can imagine, that goes to personnel issues, right? The city manager is tasked with dealing with the personnel issues as council members. It's hard to think about those types of things where the city manager has to always be thinking, all right, what does our MOU say? What are the responsibilities of people? Are they working at a class? What are they doing? That's why they're kind of the head of staff and responsible for all those issues. And of course, Alex talked about the budget. They're responsible for preparing the budget for the council's consideration. It's your budget. It's the city's budget. The council has to approve it, but the city manager prepares it. And again, it says, manages also the city property as far as different property decides kind of how to manage it. Obviously, you would come back to the council if there's like leases or anything like that that really impact property. That would still go to the council.
And this isn't listed as a duty of the city council, I mean, the city manager, but city manager sets, the city council sets the policy, adopts ordinances. Part of the city manager's role too is to make those recommendations to the city council. This is what we should do. This is what you should set your policy as, based on, what I see in the day-to-day operations of the city, or you've expressed this interest in X, and this is how I suggest we go about doing that recommendation. And it's up to the the council is the decision maker, and so you don't have to take that recommendation, but that's definitely part of the duty as well. So the governance manual, the role of the city manager, just to reiterate, it says acts as the chief executive of the city. That's pretty straightforward. But we also say in our governance manual, this position is intended to be non-political, focus on efficiency, effectiveness, and professionalism. I just want to highlight that because you all are elected officials, you run, you campaign. That's not the city manager's job. The city manager is supposed to be sort of the civil servant professional who is managing the day-to-day operations of the city and not involved in those political issues or disputes. So to touch on some other stuff in our governance manual, talking about how this relationship works, and we touched on it a little already today, but council members are encouraged to engage with the city manager, have conversations with them. I think all of you do. Different city managers have that, handle it differently. Some want, one set meeting a week, you come in, you have your hour. Others have more open door, stop by whenever you want. It just depends on what works best for them, what works best for you. And so that's important to, have those conversations, bring those up. I think the worst thing, city manager and council members, you may disagree on an item or something. I think the worst thing for a city manager is to be caught off guard in the middle of a meeting that, council members not happy with something. And that's absolutely, you're right if you're not, don't support an item or have concerns, but it's always good to make sure the city manager is aware of that. For one, they might be able to address it. It might be an issue they've never thought about. But you just don't want, them to be caught off guard by any concerns. The the other thing is, we talked about this a little bit, but any city, but especially a city of Cloverdale's size, does not have unlimited resources, does not have unlimited staff. So, Kevin is doing a lot of stuff that in a bigger city, right? In Santa Rosa, there's probably an assistant city manager, and there's probably, what are often called management analysts, which are really just assistants that help carry out some of these things. But here, that we really don't have that. It's Kevin. So he has to decide, how do we use the limited resources most effectively. And so, all the council members will go to him with issues of, hey, we should do this, we should do that. And part of Kevin's job is figuring out how to manage that. And it can be tricky because there's no perfect way without bringing every little issue to the city council. So I know I have some clients, I've worked with some clients in the past where they have sort of strict policies that any request that's going to take more than 2 hours of city time has to go to the city council, or more than 5 hours a month from one council member has to go to the city council. We've never had something like that in Cloverdale, because it's more informal. We want to be able to work with folks, but ultimately the city manager does have to say, like, this, yes, I can spend an hour on this, but it's just not the type of project, given the council set priorities and budget, that we can spend 10 hours of staff time on. And so they have to make that decision. And if you disagree with it, it's back to the budget. This is a great time to add more resources or bring this up as something that larger the council can give direction on.
And on that, Alex, I know that in the city, and this is something that's been discussed quite a bit in the past. But as far as the kind of what Alex mentioned, all of you have great ideas. All of you have all of these projects that you're on the council, you want things done. There's also like, hey, the residents want this, or I've heard this. But it's also a good time when the council meets and they set goals and you set your priorities. So here's what we're going to focus on. I always see it as these are the main focuses. Things come up during, and the smaller things, sure, they get kind of squeezed in. And I think sometimes, city managers get those done. They're small, but there's things that really are going to start pushing those priorities that the council as a whole has set. They're going to start kind of pushing them down because something else potentially comes up. I always see at that time, that's really more of a check back in with council. Look, here's something that came up. Here's something that a council member wants. Here's something that the council wants, but more of the conversation of those priorities that you've set already, the goals that you're kind of in a way also evaluating your city manager or city attorney on. We're going to have to move that priority down because now we're focused on this one. It's that constant communication, just making sure everybody's on the same page, because somebody may have a big project that you want, but that wasn't put in as a council. That's when I always advise city managers, hey, and the council member that wants it, this may be a good time to maybe put that on the agenda for discussion of, is this what the council as a whole, because we talked about who provides direction to the city manager. And at the end of the day, the direction really is from the council. And what does that mean? That means the council sitting together as at the dais providing direction, right?
Yeah, Jose, on the goal setting, and I know Cloverdale does it, but it's it comes up and we do a 2-year budget, so we do obviously our budgetary goals right there. But how often should goal setting be? I mean, should it be an annual thing every 6 months, or annual and touch base? Or, I mean, what's your suggestion on that?
Well, it always depends. Every jurisdiction does it a little different. The jurisdictions that I work with go, most of them go at least like every year, just to kind of have, but there's also times where there needs to be, you need to kind of touch base on kind of this new big thing came up, it's taking all of staff's time, it's taking the city resources, but we have to do it. But there may be a check-in of, this is why we're going to be late on, because I can tell you for staff, for your manager, for everybody, they don't want to go back to the next goal setting and be behind on absolutely everything, right? So it's kind of nice to go in sometimes to reevaluate. But I know that jurisdictions at least have, the ones I work with, at least have kind of a yearly, are these still our goals? Where are we with our goals? And it's nice to have that reporting of status check. Here's where we are on those goals. And oftentimes you hear, hey, we're late because we had to work on X, Y, and Z, but that's a good communication to have with the council as a whole.
That's the model that we set up about 4 years ago was exactly that. Because there was a lot of, all five of us would go in and give our goals.
Right.
And there was nothing set, and so it was driving city manager at the time
Yeah.
crazy. And monopolizing his time. And so what we did is we said, okay, here's our set, I think it was 5 goals.
Yeah.
We set for the council. And if a council member came in and said, I want this done, they would say, well, which goal are we going to eliminate through the council
Right.
for this one to replace it? And so it's all about time management
Mm-hmm.
and setting expectations that they can actually achieve here. Because if you're always setting your city manager to fail, they will always fail.
Yep.
Your city will come apart.
Right, and the time management piece that you mentioned is great, because you might have a goal, let's say the goal is, economic development or something, and a council member has a great idea, like, let's host a job fair, and they come to the city manager. And that request could be handled depending on the details of that request. City manager might say, sure, that's great. You come in and you just want me to print some flyers or post it on the bulletin board, or maybe you need, want to see if there's a space we can have the job fair in. Like, that's one level of effort that it takes from city staff compared to an effort where it's you want city staff to put on the job fair, recruit companies to come, advertise it far and wide. So two sort of requests at a high level might look the same. You might have the city manager tell you, sure, happy to help you with first one where it's, an hour or two of staff time, and might tell you, no, we can't do that. Or like, you gotta bring this to the council for direction, even though from the outside, they might look very similar.
So I think outside of our budget, when was the last time that we had a goal setting exercise?
It was under David,
Yep.
and then Kevin did an update for us in a meeting.
So that was,
So which is coming up now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's why, yeah.
It was almost a year ago.
Question, I think we're due for a touch base goal setting, absolutely.
previous council.
I think you might have been there for the update. I don't remember. It would have been right at the beginning.
I know.
So
Yeah.
Pete, I know with Councilmember Lasky, were you here for any goal setting exercise at all?
not a goal setting, it would have been an update on goals.
Yeah.
You two were not here for that.
So
For the goal setting.
Yeah, it was kind of in the transition when Councilmember Walter stepped aside and we were kind of involved in the appointment process and all that, so
So
that's.
that's March, April.
Yeah, it was.
And I think that's why I brought that up. I'm kind of got the same feeling here, is hey, maybe we need to sit down and have either an update, reevaluate.
We do that in the budget.
Yeah, in budget.
When you set the budget is when you set your goals.
Yeah.
That's that whole day long meeting that
Mhm.
you guys work with.
Because I guess like Healdsburg, they have a separate, just these are our goals. That's, it's separate from what the budget is, but I would kind of lean into that maybe like on a yearly basis, beginning of the year. And then, updating as things change,
Right.
developments or certain things pop up,
You just have to be careful because like some of these projects are 3, 4, 5 years in the making. And if you get a year into it and then you change your goals, now you've blown a year's worth of work. So that's why we really just, when you set these goals, you have to make sure they're realistic, number one, and that we continue to push to achieve them.
Yeah.
And instead of jumping on the next shining object, which I understand, we all love them, but. it's
So I
almost-
guess that's, some things as you consider update is sort of continuing your pre-existing.
Moving goals, right, yeah.
Update wouldn't necessarily be something that would throw away something, but you're
Yeah.
continuing and then maybe updating or adding other things.
And all the effort might be being geared towards a different goal at that time that's more achievable to this one. This one doesn't go away.
And the reason you go to the budget is
Yeah.
because that's, you see if you can afford it,
Yeah.
especially in a town like this, we're a low income budget. We work hard with what we have and our stretch really thin. And, one lawsuit could destroy our town and our budget for the year. we have to be very, very careful and very cognizant of
So I think that's a great point regarding the budget and goal setting. I work with a lot of folks that really tie there's a tie to both. That's why you see it a lot done at the same time as the budget. But because you're always saying, this would be great, but do we have the budget for it? Can we accomplish it, right? So in some ways, they're always tied a little, but it could be, there'd be a touch base, especially when you have a 2-year budget. Sometimes there needs to you need to come say, hey, where are we? And sometimes you get like a mid-year budget reports as well.
Yeah.
That's why even on a 2-year budget, you have the mid-years or the mid-budgets. That way you're saying, hey, where are we? Did we go through all that budget already because of an emergency, whatever it was? Do we need to allocate more? But it's always nice to see, what did we plan for and where are we on that plan?
And I think certainly, the beginning of the year, idea also includes, when you have a new council and you have a changeover, especially if you're bringing 2 or 3 new people on, it's good to establish goals or retouch base at that point, because that really helps the council all work together.
Agreed.
And to know what they are, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
to understand.
And one thing that is, and this can be difficult, but the council to, sort of self-regulate, if we set our 5 goals, are we gonna go to the city manager and propose a bunch of new things that don't tie to those goals? So, that's an important aspect, and, things come up, right?
Well, and
Circumstances change, so not to say that can't happen, but like, is this minor project that doesn't, obviously if something big happens, you gotta address it, or there's an opportunity, but just keeping that in mind, like, is this that important that we should be focused on it if it wasn't one of our goals? And the answer might be yes.
And that's the city managers, when it comes to the management right there, because of the turnaround done, even though it's 4 years. You know what I mean, with council members, like Vice Mayor was saying, is some of these are 3, 4, 5-year projects, so you've got a turnover of a council, Kevin's trying to manage, we may be almost attaining that one goal, well then, new council comes in, new goals, and it's easy to let that one kind of slide down without the pressure on it from either previous council or back to having the annual thing and saying, hey, new council, I know it's been under a year, but guess what? It's time to have another goal setting. Here's where we're at. Boom, boom, boom,
I could name a couple things really quick and easy. Number one, since Mary Ann's in the room, when I first got elected, the first thing she said to me is, please don't let the walking bridge stop. She worked, what, a decade at least?
15 years, 16 years, on that one, yeah.
And she was 1 year from it when she was removed. What if our council said, I'm not supporting this? That's a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of money spent. A striping plan with our traffic, what do they call it? No, we're doing a full striping plan for Cloverdale. We started it my first year as mayor. And it's just now going to start going into play in April-ish, depending. Alexander Valley Healthcare. I was on the school board when we started that, there's so many things we could not support, and it almost went that way with a council member last year when they're like, we don't support this. This should have low income housing. And I'm like, oh my God, we're 7 years into this project. And now we're talking about pulling the land out from under them. So it seems like we really need to be cognizant of the overall picture, not just our own beliefs as the new council member.
I think that's a great point. As a council, kind of recognizing all those things, you also depend as well on your city manager to come to like recommendations. Being very clear. The city has been working on this, spent these resources, here's where we are, here's kind of where we're going. But that's why it is at the end of the day, is kind of teamwork, right? But that's a good example.
And I think part of that is acknowledgement too. I don't know the stat, but I feel like we go to some of these presentations or workshops and they show you like 80% of your time is just the day-to-day stuff. Like the day-to-day of like making sure the water is clean and the wastewater gets treated is like a huge operation separate from, okay, we need drill a new well or, build another tank. And so like how to manage that 20% is, it's limited. It's not even, and that's made up stat, but like whatever it is, like the day-to-day is so much work too.
So are we saying that the goals of previous councils don't hold a lot of a lot of weight or not as much weight when the goals are presented? So like the bridge, what I'm saying, so like your walking bridge, that should be like 100% with the amount of time that was on it, right?
Technically, it should be, but when you elect a new council, you're electing those people to make the decisions. They have the right to start changing shit every 2 years. You'll accomplish nothing, really.
That's what I'm getting at.
You have to take the stuff into
That's what I'm
consideration.
saying,
You have
so the
to.
goals need to have some kind of weight to them to carry forward.
Correct, yeah.
I think that depends a lot too on what you're talking about exactly, like with the bridge. I could have let that go, the walkway, but instead it was on my goal list. So I would push
Right.
every single day.
Right.
For 15 years to get what I wanted. And I got it finally, but it took 15 years.
And things like that aren't always the goals of the council as a whole. You don't have to make that one of your five, but like she spent a lot of time doing these things, and that's what council members do, you know. And mine was the river park when I first came in here. It really was kind of run down at that point compared to how it could be. And it wasn't one of our goals to make the river park better, but it was a goal of mine that I worked through the council and said, can I take this on as my baby? And cost nothing, you know, it really didn't. I worked and got grants and funding and county stuff and different things. You can do it that way, but the goal setting, you'll see when you set these goals, it's like overarching. These are the things we want to accomplish, like, you know, paving, infrastructure, you know, parks maintenance, things like that. Bringing on new employees to make these things happen through your budget. So it's not always just the bridge. Just kind of using that as an example. Just because
No, I know, I get it.
However, you guys can all pick something, but you have to look at how it affects your budget and time of staff. And so if your goals are separate from what your wants and needs are, then you can through the council say, this is what I want to focus on, if directions, so that's okay. Run with them, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
As long as you're not affecting Kevin or Mike or people for 6-7 hours a day, 4 hours a day. Can't do that because that's too much time spent on that versus what the needs are.
So yeah, the goals of the council and then each individual council member personal goals. You know, you always got to look at the council goals as a whole. That's what you've sat down as an entire council and discussed. Those are the ones you've approved, those are the ones you're going for. But that's kind of like, I guess, in lack of better terms, is everybody kind of picks their own little baby and you run with it. You may have to step back from that because it's interfering with a goal of the council right there. But it's kind of like your project that a lot of people in town have said, hey, we want this going. Me personally, he's got the river park, minus the parks. You know what I mean? I know when I get told Kevin has no problem saying it ain't gonna happen. Okay, I walk away because I know he's made that decision, you know what I mean? But I keep pushing a little bit and, you know, you get a lot of people in town are just absolutely with the staff that's going on right now in the parks, they're just amazed with how this place is.
Another is open space. That's
Open,
another
yeah.
thing I started doing, and I've been working on this for about 5 years now.
Yeah.
And with every property owner, but I also work with your open space district with the county. I work with your maintenance people. I work with the UC extensions and things. I do all that on my council time, my personal time. But it's costing the city nothing, and the city knows that I'm doing it behind the scenes. You know, it's one of those things that if there's anything that I would question that the city would not want, or when it's time, we update and say, hey, look at these guys want to meet, and they meet with people. It's depending on what's going on.
Yeah, and that was the great point. That was the point I was gonna make sure got added was that, you know, you can have your own goals. You need to make sure they're aligned with the
Right.
city goals if you're gonna be using
Yeah.
city resources. And by that, I mean like maybe not hours and hours of time, but even just the city's name or a little bit of time. Or even like the open space, so much was done about that on your own time, but still like council had to approve acquiring it and council had to, you know, approve filing grants or things like that. So there, just want to make sure, and that's what, you know, Kevin's around for too, to say this is yeah, that's this is already a goal and you take it on, or it seems maybe contradictory to other things, we should take it to council to see if that's something they're okay with. Should be worked on.
So is that another way to say it, as you set goals for the city as a council? And then there are certain things that council members really want to work on and want to help with. And kind of, it's nice for the council to also say, yes, that's a project, that way you also know that's a project that the city wants to work on. as long as there's a lot of work that all of you put in,
Mhm.
that don't involve staff time, but if you're out there kind of trying to bring in something or doing something for the city, Alex said, just having a consensus of the council of an agreement of, yes, we want that, go be the champion for it. And then the touching base with the city manager to make sure kind of if there is additional support or whatever, but the council has kind of agreed to it.
Well, and a prime example of that one that I can bring up right now is the new playground at Ferber Park. That was mentioned to, oh gosh, I know to numerous council members, whether they're current ones or previous. It always kept coming up for about 2 years. I got it all the time. I know Vice Mayor got it all the time and other. So, when you work with and have that working relationship with staff, you're not directing them. You're just bringing the information saying, hey, people are really looking at this. It goes in and you sit down with Kevin. That was a 2.5, 3 year project right there. And that has just absolutely flipped that park right now. But you get so frustrated if you want to hit the ground running and be like, just call them and order this stuff. You know what I mean? I know that has to go to full council and all that, but you got to kind of pump the brakes a little bit because your personal goal becomes like, hey, and you start pushing it. That's where you have to sit back and be like, hold on, this has to go to council. I think we all know that right there, but you start gaining momentum on your personal projects or like you said, open space or Marianne with the bridge, man, it's your baby. You're going for it. And you're gonna push as hard as you can. You get shut down a lot, but it still doesn't make that goal go away. You're still okay. I got kind of ran into a hurdle. I'm still working this. Successful with Marianne, successful with Todd, successful with whoever jumps in on these things. You know what I mean? You start seeing the city really come around. So I know it's tough to step back.
But also at the same time, it's nice, like Mark, when he first came on, he wanted to work on the old Shamrock property. It's on just outside of our city limits. And I was the mayor, so he asked me, hey, what do you think about trying to do something with this? And I said, I did something with it for 2 years. Here's all the information, here's your contacts. Now you're not starting from ground zero and having them think that we're not talking to each other or not passing on information because they'd be like, we've already been through this through the last 3 council members. We're not going to do it again. He hit the ground running at 60% and has gained a lot of headway on a project he wants to do. It cost us nothing. Nothing's come to fruition. Nothing is out there that is going to be good or bad for the city until he says, okay, now we're at that point. Here's your update. Here's what we're thinking. And it can come to the council at that point.
What does the council want to do?
What do they want to do? Is this something they're interested in? But he didn't have to go try to find his contacts, find all the people. I'd already made the contacts, have the ability to go on everyone's property, have access to the locks since I put in the gates. I mean, it's like there's so many things that were already done. He hit the ground running, and I love that. It's cooperation,
I think
collaboration.
that's really the importance of doing goal setting when a new
Right.
council comes in. We have a new council coming in another year. I think the fact that we missed that with our council and maybe there was interpersonal relationships that were better than others. I really missed out on that opportunity to talk to the rest of my council, sort of establish what my goals were and get information or even help. So I think I would like to reiterate the importance of goal setting and really establish that for new, each rollover every 2 years of the council, that should be a priority in the beginning and maybe every year. That might be separate from the budget because, the budget's kind of made, as the councils get their seniority and sort of like you get some time under the belt, they can work on the budget and some, that will roll over to the next council. But I think it's good for new councils to come in and that would be a good opportunity to touch base, hopefully like align and
No
build
pause in
partnerships.
between goals.
That makes sense. But to become a champion on kind of something that you want to push forward and be able to kind of know where are our goals and I can do. And Mayor, I know there was a question from our.
Oh, I was just gonna bring up that it's pretty easy if you look at it simply, it's just. I'm gonna use the Grange as an
Right.
example. I didn't use a dime of city money on that Grange project. It was $100 and some thousand, but if I would have been on council and used city money, then yeah, I would have had been to all the council meetings about it, I would have had to give you updates. But the city did not contribute a dime to that. I was not on council. So I don't really give a shit what the city thinks about it, to tell you the truth. It was a project that needed to be done. I did it and we did it in about 3 months.
There you go.
But you just do it. But that had nothing to do with the city, and I could have said, I don't think other people put down that I had been mayor or some bullshit, but that had nothing to do with what I was doing. But I get it, if I would have gotten money, or even if I was gonna use some of the contacts that I had while I was on council, then I would have had to come in, but I don't, so.
And well, that's a great point, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on about like, you still can do, even if the council goals are one thing, you can do something else.
Right.
Well, we
But
always
you
did
gotta,
that,
you gotta just be clear about who you're representing when you're doing that.
That's right.
Um,
I think right now the conversation has been being a champion on on a related goal that the city council, that the city, and there's some resources potentially behind it. In directions, but yeah, we'll talk about kind of as individuals, you're still individuals. And if it's not associated, or it's not the city council doing this, or the city of Cloverdale, if it's you as an individual are also working on this, you may be a council member, but everybody's got their own things that they're also passionate about, that require no city resources, that require no time from staff.
Well, and you've got to commend everybody sitting here too. If you are on council or previous council, yeah, everybody in town, we wouldn't have any information if they didn't have great ideas. They're bringing it to us. But you got to commend everybody in here for stepping up and actually going the extra step and being on council to be that, a decision maker or working as council's whole, because that's what brings community projects, community ideas to fruition right there. It's like, hey, guess what? Here's what Cloverdale would love. If everybody sat on it, we would have nothing going on. You know what I mean? So thank you to everybody.
So as a side point, so when you guys get paid all this, there's not a lot of pay, there's a lot of work. Depending on you guys.
More than I take.
Same here. I know.
Um, so just wanted to touch on, we touched on this a little bit, but communications with staff, your communications, you can ask inquiry we talked about, but really your communication should be through the city manager. So from our governance manual, it says council members may not direct or attempt to influence the appointment, removal, or actions of city staff, publicly or privately. So, city manager decides who to hire, decides who to discipline or fire. And so, letting him know that, you're not happy with how some project is working or how some department is operating or things like that, that's fair game, but there's a line between that and saying, and now city manager, you should fire that person. Because that took too long or that, and if you have concerns about employees, or those are things that should go to the city manager, right? Not you directly as an employee, you not calling out an employee publicly or privately, bringing that instead to the city manager. He's their supervisor. He also may have more context for why something happened, but that's, we want those conversations to be in private with the supervisor, which is the city.
And when in jurisdictions where that doesn't happen, I will tell you that the next phone call that happens is usually to the attorney. From either the manager or the staff member saying, I was criticized, I was this, and I was made it is important to kind of just know, it's almost knowing staff, they're the city manager staff, right? If you have an issue with the performance of somebody, going to the city manager and saying, hey, or I heard this, sometimes addressing it with the staff themselves ends up kind of crossing this rule that I was just talking about.
And this isn't on the slide, we touched on it a little earlier, but you may get these comments from staff too. Staff is concerned, coming to you, maybe they live in town and you're the person they voted for. Concerned about something or how something is operating, and, you know, you can absolutely talk with them, take that in. It's important to, you know, one, not make any promises to them because you as a council member, you know, can't. You know, and then pass that on to the city manager. If I, you know, this, you know, Bob came to tell me he was really upset about like how X, Y, and Z was handled. I just want to let you know, and then the city manager can go and handle that and figure out, you know, what's going on and what needs to happen. So, removal of the city
So
manager.
this is the slide that makes every city manager very nervous.
Yeah.
This is more of informing the council of what.
But we mentioned that our governance manual says, you know, their city manager is first supposed to be non-political, isolated from, you know, sort of the tight spot, for lack of a better word, the city council may have. And that's other places too. It's in our municipal code, which requires a 4/5 vote to terminate the city council. It also prevents termination of the city manager near an election. So, you know, either before or after the election. And part of that is, you know, this is supposed to be a non-political position. So no one should be campaigning on firing the city manager and then come in and the first thing you do is fire the city manager. They're, you know, working for the whole council as a whole, and that's sort of baked into this. That's part of the reason why, you know, our you know, line level staff, they're in unions, they, you know, can't be fired except for cause. City manager could be terminated with no cause if the council decides this just isn't working out. At will employment. Part of that is, you know, is his contract calls for severance because it's not as stable as the rest of the stuff and, you know, other employees' employment is. And the contract defines what cause is, and you know, these are just some examples, you know, unauthorized use or theft of property, obviously, if you find out, you know, city manager is embezzling money, if they are, you know, willful misconduct or malfeasance, which is a pretty high bar. It doesn't mean, oh, you got a project late or you delivered, you know, C-level work and we really want A-level work. This is really a serious charge.
Like being caught with a small child in a closet.
That would be.
That's very serious.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't thinking that direction.
But here's what I don't get as being the city manager and being the CEO of staff and all that, where does insubordination fit into that?
So that is, you know, they are the CEO of staff, but we mentioned council gives direction. So if council has set a policy or given the direction of we want you to work on,
Council as a whole.
council as a whole has given direction through their policy of go do X. If you know, city manager ignores that, doesn't do it. So you say, we need to repave, you know, Smith Street, you know, that could take a couple of months to do, you know, there's a delay, maybe city manager says, we gotta finish this other thing first. You know, is that insubordination? Probably not, but just ignoring the council and saying, actually, I spent that money and instead we paved, you know, Williams Street instead, like that can get to the point of you're doing that. And it's part of the city manager's job to come back and say, you know, this is why I know you gave me that direction, but this whole council is why I think this is a bad idea. And the council can decide, no, we're sticking with what we told you to do, or they can change their mind.
Right, and I think the intent, at least this slide and the first point of the city manager is intentionally insulated from the politics of the city council. Is really the city manager is there, works for the council, to the council as a whole. So they're not there to kind of get into kind of the different kind of potential political issues or struggles. And that's why you have kind of the election. The election also, the time line of having to wait even before an election or after an election is also to provide new council members the opportunity to kind of know kind of what the city manager is doing, get up to speed with what are the laws, what are the regulations that cover the position, and really kind of what is going on, and using that time to evaluate how your city manager is doing.
So I guess just as a sort of a summation, we've talked so far about role of council, role of city manager, and our city manager form of government. And I thought that the governance manual, encapsulated the benefits of this and why we have this set up pretty well. And it says that the benefits are, professional management that brings expertise, and to your point, like continuation of existing ideas from council to council, clear separation of powers and roles, reduce political interference in day-to-day operations where individual direction is from one council member. You mentioned, 5 different council members giving 5 different directions, and results, overall in more stable and efficient government. So it's been an hour, and just wanted to pause to see if you guys want to break or just plow ahead.
Use some more water.
We need to recess.
Okay.
Remember, we are still recording in lines.
Correct.
You're still in session.
So really, there's no changes. The reason I came was I wanted to hear for any changes.
Yeah.
So it's exactly the same as it always was.
You are correct.
The governance manual?
I haven't seen a copy of those.
No, just the overall workings of the city government. It's exactly what.
And I think we're gonna get more specific into areas of the governance manual, and I think that it still exists, the governance manual. I think that the council has made some changes.
Yeah,
There's been
yeah.
updates to the governance manual. I think what you'll hear is the concepts are still kind of the same. There may be just more details.
Yeah, just updates towards, it had things in writing that weren't there that didn't exist back in the
Is that
day.
a copy of it right there?
So it's the code of ethics was added
Thank
to it with punishment is a new addition.
Oh, we got punishment? Is it gonna be like block and tackle kind of thing out in the square? And we can hang them by their feet?
Absolutely.
Otherwise, I'm not interested.
There's gonna be a proposed amendment.
Yeah, I would like to propose that.
I'd second that motion.
The older I get,
We are what?
Let's get it, I get it.
This time it's not me.
Look at that, punishment on
I think the PowerPoint has frozen.
Yeah. Great.
I'm gonna go out and make that phone call, because this is going much longer than I thought it was going.
it. You need me to find some batteries?
Maybe.
Okay, well, do we wanna,
We just,
do you wanna keep going, or you wanna take a 5-minute break, pause, So Mayor, it's up to you, Mayor. I mean, we could take a quick break, to try to get our technology back in line, or we could.
We'll go ahead and recess for 5 minutes, resume again back at.
and just so you guys know, we're still
11:15.
not, we can't
We are
pause
still-
it because
Put it on mute and think.
So for the record, we will go ahead and take a recess for till 11:15 and resume back at 11:15.
Perfect.
So if anybody needs to do anything, then use the bathroom or do whatever they're trying to do.
Hey Alex, I just jumped in. Do you need any help with anything?
Yeah, the mouse died, so we're getting some batteries for it.
Okay, I don't know if there's any batteries in the break room. I think they're in the office area by the front desk.
Well, Todd's got some.
Yeah.
This works.
Must be fancy.
Nothing. The computer just froze.
Got it.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
You know what it is?
Needs to be on.
Put it on something.
The old school mouse pad. Everywhere.
You know, yeah, batteries,
Is it working?
I don't know.
You're just trying trying to advance the slide?
Yeah, I think the computer's just.
Oh, there's no.
Yeah.
Did you get battery ready?
Take this one.
CPD to the rescue.
Oh, it's a.
Who's all through that?
What's up with this, chief?
What do you do?
Sometimes it doesn't like the shiny.
It goes on.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Old school mouse
The
pad.
batteries died. How early after that?
Right?
No,
Yeah.
I feel like it stops, then starts.
But
Might be that Chinese IT.
Can you advance by hitting the
It
down
was-
button? Does that work or?
No. Sorry.
I'm gonna make a note. We've got the IT fixed over at the CPAC, but it's time to move in. Let's fix some wire at the conference room. Holy smokes.
I can add that to my to-do list.
Mike, did you say if Mary Ann could keep that copy? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. That was an extra.
Perfect. Thank you.
We were learning how to use that 1970s binding machine and gave up after that one.
1970s fine.
Mary Ann, you can keep that copy of that manual.
Oh, good, thank you.
Absolutely.
Nice turnout for the food drive over there.
Yeah.
Hey, Alex or Mayor, if
Yes.
you'd like when you get out of recess, that manual is available on our website as well. It's under the governance page or just cloverdale.net/governance manual.
Gotcha.
If members of the public ever want to review it, it's on the council page. Not necessary, but just in case.
You just gotta keep them moving.
Oh, because it goes to sleep.
Steven.
We are city clerk.
No, that was my content.
Where's our video?
You haven't stopped that.
Hey, Alex, if you want, you can take the batteries out of my mouse in my office if you want.
It's
We got new batteries, Mike.
It's alive.
It needs a mouse pad.
Are we on video? Oh,
Yes.
Sorry.
I think he had like 15 more seconds.
Sorry, I'm just pushing buttons.
Yeah, I'm good.
I'll charge the word, let's
She wanted the rundown of the.
So next we're gonna talk about.
We're waiting for the 15.
Mayor said.
I'm here for you.
You call back to order.
No.
All right, let's call the meeting back to order at 11:15.
So we talked about role of city council, role of city manager. We're gonna talk about the role of the mayor now. This will be shorter than what we talked about so far, because the role of the mayor is pretty limited. Under state law and our municipal code, the mayor's elected for, terms of 1 year at a time. We have an election every December to select new mayor. They are the presiding officer for council meetings, the chair of the meeting. Other than that, they don't have any formal powers greater than any of the other council members. There is one exception. Our code says that they make the appointments for the planning commission, but those have to be approved by the city council by a vote. So the city council is still, very intimately involved in that process too, but the nomination is from the mayor.
And that mirrors state law for directly elected mayors. I know that's kind of, that's what they would do
Yeah.
for directly elected mayors, and that's why in the municipal code, I think it kind of mirrors that, even though in Cloverdale, it's not directly elected.
The governance manual expands on this a little bit about what the role of the mayor is, what it means to be the presiding officer. So, they facilitate the discussions, recognize council members for speaking, decide when, recognize the public, decide how much time the public has. If there's a lot of speakers, more or less time might be given. They also serve as the spokesperson for the city. We have a public information officer that's part of the city clerk's job, but the mayor is the face of the city, also the spokesperson for the city. They also have the ability to reorder the agenda. You see that sometimes maybe there's a lot of people for something that's later on in the agenda, and the mayor will bring that up to the beginning of the meeting.
They also, I don't think you mentioned this, Alex, sorry, but they also do work with the city manager and the city clerk to kind of for set the agendas as well, right?
Correct, and that is, it's not about the content of the agenda item, it's just about when an item is going and whether it's gonna go on consent, whether it's gonna be on the regular, the mayor might have a sense of this is not that controversial, let's put it on consent, or yeah, I understand there's a heavy workload for staff, a big agenda, let's push this item to the next meeting. The mayor also decides who receives proclamations, that's in our policy as well, governance manual, as the council knows, once a year we set a calendar of proclamations, so that's set by the whole council, but then the mayor, has ultimate responsibility for who is going to receive it. Accept the proclamation. And now we also have, this isn't in the slides, but we have the citizen recognition program where each one of you has the opportunity to recognize throughout the course of the year, recognize, a citizen who's, worthy of recognition. So now we're talking about council meetings, how they actually work, what the rules are for them. And I think you're all probably familiar with the Brown Act. And there's a lot in the Brown Act that is relevant for meetings, right? The Brown Act requires that we have an agenda, that we not talk about things that aren't on the agenda. The Brown Act requires that the public have an opportunity to be heard, to give public comment. The Brown Act requires that all these meetings be in public. Unless there's a specific reason, authorized reason to be in closed session. But other than that, the Brown Act doesn't really get into the nuts and the bolts of meetings and how they operate. Some cities have adopted rules of procedures. They may have them in their code. Many cities adopt Robert's rules. You may have heard of that, or Rosenberg's rules. The city has not adopted either. We have no formally adopted rules of procedure. The governance manual says Robert's rules is sort of a guide, but we haven't adopted any formal rules of order. And that's been part of the council's desires over the years. So let's try to keep things as informal as possible. And so the governance manual says the mayor exercises discretion in applying these parliamentary procedures. But there's a preference for minimizing that. So the mayor is ultimately in charge with running the meeting. You know, determining, when it's time to move on, let's have a motion, or, council member, this council member, you've had a chance, we're not going back for a second round of comments or that sort of thing.
And one thing we're looking at, I know it mentions Robert's rules. There's been a big move away from Robert's rules, to Rosenberg's rules, in order, a lot of folks are saying, wait a minute, we're not the parliament, right? We're parliament. Well, we don't have how many members, right, are part of that, but that's kind of what those rules are created. If you look at Robert's rules, I mean, Robert's rules of order, it's a lot. It is, yeah, exactly. They're going more to like more of the Rosenberg rules of order, which we're looking at as well. In the next kind of the updates to either the governance manual or something if the council wanted more kind of structure or something to follow, but something a little more simple than Robert's rules. But that's something we've been looking at as far as maybe a recommendation for the future.
And along those lines, like it's not parliament and there's no parliamentarian. So there's no, the governance manual gives the mayor this authority, and council members may ask the city clerk or city attorney, hey, what would Robert's rules require? What is this proper? And there may be situations where we provide the answer, it may not be, because the answer might not be clear. But there's no parliamentarian who's ruling, yes, that was appropriate, yes, that was not.
Gotcha.
You'll hear me jump in from time to time if there's maybe a ground acting, hey, we're talking about something that's not really on the agenda. But other than that, it's really the mayor is charged with conducting the meeting. Last thing to mention is, we have an item on our agenda for future agenda items. And it's not since those particular topics aren't agendized, we can't discuss them at length, brief couple sentences on why something wants to go on the agenda. Maybe someone has a quick question, that's okay, but no extended discussion, and we require a consensus of the council. So we want to see those general, so 3 thumbs up, 3 head nods, that sort of thing. That. Governance manual has some flowery language about how we should be conducting these meetings. Really about that, let's all try to behave in a civil and professional manner. I know things can get heated, they're talking important topics that are being discussed and there's strong disagreements, but important to maintain professionalism in the council. Governance manual says council and staff are expected to maintain appropriate order and decorum, avoid side conversation, disruptions, and unnecessary delays. So my pet peeve is, I don't know if Mike's still on here. Like sometimes you can hear Mike talking with the student liaison, you can't focus on what's going on. And that can happen all along. And so that's part of it too. It's not trying to
Poor Mike, you're gonna call him
Yeah.
out. I mean, he's not even
hope
here.
he's on mute. This is
He can take it.
Yeah. I give him darts in the middle of the meeting, but they, so the public can be engaged, so you can hear what your fellow council members are saying. Doesn't mean you're never gonna lean over and ask a question or make a quick comment, but to limit those sort of extended conversations that may.
It's to delve into side conversations. Sometimes people might get a text message from an emergency situation. Also some folks might be text messaging somebody off the dais for instruction or something like that. So how would that be determined or sort of?
Well,
looked at?
so avoiding side conversations and disruptions is really about, amongst your council members. If someone's focused on something else and they're quiet because they're on their phone, that's their business, and it's the voters to decide whether that's something they wanna, that's how they want their council member to be engaged. But this is really about sort of the disruptive behavior. And limiting that sort of disruption. I will note, this isn't a Public Records Act training, but if you're texting someone about business during a meeting, it's public record, and if you're texting during the meeting, that's the fastest way for someone in the public to say, oh, I want to see what that is, and make that request. That's, we definitely have experience dealing with that in other jurisdictions where you will get a message, public records request the next day for all text messages sent by, council members during last night's meeting, or by, council member X during last night's.
There are jurisdictions that apply policies as well regarding it. But even when we just say, I know it's kind of flowery language, but if you really look at the goal of maintaining a civil and professional meeting environment, like that is very important. That is very important in any jurisdiction, and kind of having kind of your council meetings. And the reason why it's important as well, not only because you're trying to get the work of the people done, right? You're trying to get these things done, but I think it's also for the public, because for your residents that are watching these meetings that are there, because I have been part of different agencies that won't be named, but you start getting people saying, what's going on there? What's happening there? And there's this element of trust that starts kind of eroding. So I think, although, it does sound, it's kind of like everybody needs to play nice, but it's really more of that kind of the providing your residents with kind of that level of trust. Now, as Alex mentioned, items do get, there's important things that this council does. Every council does, very important. So there are things that there's tension at times because you may be passionate about something. But just keeping in mind, we're here to do the public's work, right? We're elected, residents are watching and doing it and still pushing hard for the things you want. But that's why I think that's where the governance manual goes. Just, make sure folks are watching. We want to make sure to keep people's trust and that they know we're doing the best for them. Anyway, that was my flowery.
And that made me think too, like, it's not just your residents, it's also your staff, the city staff,
Correct.
right?
Very good.
That, quick way to lose your city manager or some department head is, God, every 2 weeks I gotta go to this 4-hour meeting where I'm thrown into the middle of them fighting, and they're fighting through me or whatever, I don't wanna deal with that anymore, and so that's something to be cognizant of. This is just a minor thing, but you're responsible for notifying the mayor before you leave a meeting. We need to know, are you leaving for the night, or you're just running to the bathroom for 5 minutes, right? You may not want to call a recess. Hey, this is a long item. I'll just, go grab a drink of water and be right back. And so we need to know that.
And the key with the mayor on that one is as long as you still have a quorum, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Because there are times, on a long meeting, you don't do it, but there's times, hey, we just had 10-minute break and now I realize I gotta use the restroom.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it a break, like, I'll just go be back in 90 seconds and let you know that that's.
So we've had council members that would just get up and leave when they were frustrated or upset,
Right.
and they would just leave, and you didn't know if they were coming back, you didn't know what the plan was. And when you have to document and record everything, you know what the plan is,
Right.
so that you're prepared for the next item.
Just for the minutes.
With our council, we've been pretty effective at like passing notes,
Mhm.
like, hey, maybe,
Yep.
request a recess or something.
Well, that worked good. And last time, and I remember it was a couple meetings ago or 3 meetings ago, everybody, we were in a long one, and Councilmember Marquez was like, take 15. I'm like, hey, let's do this. You know what I mean? So that does work.
Whatever it is, there was
Yeah.
literally people that go walk out,
Yeah,
and you're like, where are they going?
Yeah, one of these things is that one of us can be excused
right.
without calling the meeting.
Absolutely.
And so, I think, a note is appropriate, where it's not necessarily like a
Exactly.
side conversation, but it's.
Well, you're not disrupting the
Yeah.
meeting. That's very important.
And this doesn't apply really so much to the council, but part of the mayor's job is, limiting disrupting out in the audience. We don't usually have big crowds at the meeting, so it's not a big deal, but it's disruptive if you have people cheering in the meeting every time a public, the way they make 60 public commenters take even longer is for there to be applause after each person and that sort of thing. And so that's part of the role of the mayor in running meetings.
We could have gone like 20 minutes talking about disruptive
Yeah.
behavior and the policy and the Brown Act and the warnings. Luckily, here in Cloverdale, we really haven't seen that. There's been a lot of situations in other, knock on wood, in other jurisdictions where, somebody from the public would be removed. But it takes a lot for that to happen. It takes warnings. It's got to be disruptive behavior. Then because people have the right to be there, right? That's kind of their right to look at, to watch, to be at meetings.
You can't really say that unless you were here when Mark Kinsey was our mayor, because he, in the middle of the meeting, jumped the table and got in a fist fight with the guy that was speaking up. And I was sitting right next to the chief. This was shortly after I got on. And I asked Chief, I said, aren't you gonna stop that? And he just sort of leaned back in his chair a little bit. He said, maybe later. He said, I'm kind of enjoying this. I said, Jesus Christ, get out, fix that. And he went, oh, you're such a killer of a good time. And he got up and he stopped it. But that's my comparison of what is worth looking at and thinking about. That you can't jump the table and beat up somebody. Well, it was Christopher Welch who was browbeating Mark Kinsey. And he can be difficult, but
Browbeating is okay. It's not hate speech. It's not.
ooh, he had a short fuse. He jumped the
It was
table. I didn't think he was capable.
That was the hard part with, some of our people have come into protest against some of the things we're doing is they have the legal right to. So
They
you
do
make sure you
indeed.
set their parameters.
Right.
And as long as they abide by the parameters, they can say anything they want. They can sit there and call you every name in the book, as long as it's not hate speech. It is what it is.
Well, we are not planning to recommend adding, jumping the dice and entering into a fist fight for the mayor. So that will be.
It's all.
Okay.
Well, that's bad.
You have to roll over more than jump over.
Sorry.
Our mayor, until he got arrested. Sheriff called me on that one. Said, get ready.
All right, so the next few slides we're talking about now really delving into the governance manual and some of the policies that it sets about council conduct. So the first one is there's a section about collective versus individual action. So obviously each one of you is elected individually, but you serve, collectively. It's not the president, so there's only 5 of you together, get the opportunity to make these decisions, have these votes. So each of you is free during these discussions to express your views and deliberation as those are ongoing. The governance manual says, once the council majority reaches a decision, everyone is encouraged to support that decision publicly. That's not, it says that language is specific, are encouraged. It's not a law where you still have your right to express your opinions, but it is helpful for cohesion and city governance, if there's one unified voice, especially after, maybe difficult decisions to support the path the city went on. So, that's something that was in the old version of the governance manual. It's something that's in this version as well, about really encouraging all of you, if you're on the losing side of a vote or a decision, to encourage, support that decision publicly. Or, also if you can't support it publicly, then just be neutral on it publicly too, is an option too. If you do, you have your rights, still your First Amendment rights to go out there and say your opinion. If you disagree with the decision of the council, you have to be really clear that you are doing that as an individual and not representing the council, right? You're there as an individual expressing your personal opinions, which is your right, but you're not reflecting the position of the city or the position of the council on that.
And I think that the point there, Alex, is kind of when you act as a body, there's always the kind of the when you go and we voted on this, we did this, and that's because you did that. But just the I don't agree with what we did, what the council did. Just being very clear of if you're going to kind of be very clear of the distinction. It doesn't take away your ability to disagree with something or just say, hey, but it's just I think it's an element I think of the encouraging of the it goes back to the more of the kind of the respectful manner of well the council voted on this is what they're going to do, however I voted no, and here's why I voted no. Like that's still you're okay, it says encouraged, but I think it's just kind of really playing, you hear like they don't know what they're doing, but it's just kind of encouraging to more of being the kind of the in a respectful manner of just my colleagues voted this way. I don't agree.
Yeah.
And here's why. But being very clear, I'm saying this, I'm doing this.
And it's important, I mean, the governance manual said when you're asked to speak about a topic, when you're asked about an issue, it's ideal for you to give the position of the city and then you can clarify, if you feel the need to clarify. I didn't, this is the example that says, while I voted against X, the council voted in support. Because the goal is to help communicate the position of the city. This ensuring clear, unified direction of the city, even when there's limits.
Well, and even when you're clarifying the position, you also have to remember your audience is asking questions. So if I were to go to a Rotary meeting, who asked me there as a council member or as a vice mayor or mayor and say, have them ask me a question and have me give just a personal answer. Be like, oh, this is my personal opinion on it. And then you want to know that you're there representing the council. You have to give the support of the council. You can disagree, but you need to give why the council supports this as a whole and that you represent that answer.
Were you looking?
That was not, but
So, no, that's
I'll pay
exactly,
attention to your
yeah,
stuff.
no, that's exactly right. When when you're asked to speak on something, invited there as a member of city council, you should reflect the position of the city. And again, if you need to, clarify that, this is what they did, we voted on X, this is how we're moving forward, FYI, I didn't support that, but for the X reason, but this is what the council decided to do. If you need to clarify that, it's fine, but you're there to reflect the official position of the city. Or, you need to be very clear that, you're not there on behalf of the city, you're not invited there as the, representative of the city, you're just there to talk, me, individual, Bob Smith, I'm here to just engage on this. Again, you're in this public forum or meetings, the goal is to communicate the city's adopted position, not your individual viewpoints. And this just to reiterate this, when you're speaking, you need to clarify when you're speaking that they are, either you're representing the full council's position, or you need to be clear that you're speaking and expressing only your own personal views.
You don't lose the right to be an individual. You are a council member, right? But depends on your right. You're there to represent the council, kind of what the council did, and then like you said, Alex, I like that. Personally, I voted no or whatnot, and then you can definitely are still free to list your kind of opinion. But that's kind of when you're there as a representative of the council as a whole.
Because like Todd says, you have to know your audience because you can go and state, hey, I'm a citizen, I'm not representing the council, I'm a citizen of Cloverdale and I'm here for gathering information or giving my own personal opinion. But if that person goes back to social media and says, Councilmember X said this, and this, it's like everybody else doesn't know what the one-on-one conversation is. So basically you have to pick your battles and know your audience. Be careful of, what you say and when you say it and how you say it.
And this isn't on here too, but it's especially true, regional boards, for example, like you're really appointed there to, while you're an individual serving on those boards, like you were appointed to represent the city, and ultimately the city could remove you if you're not reflecting, the city's position on issues. So the governance policy also establishes a legislative policy for the city, and this is taken right from the governance manual, that the city's policies generally to oppose uh, regulations, state laws, they could be regional things as well, that preempt local authority, negatively impact the city's budget, or impose unfunded mandates. And that we provide support stuff that provides funding opportunities, protects local government revenue, or creates the incentives, rather than mandating something. If the state wants to create an incentive, if we do something, that our policy is generally to support that, even if it may not be something we want to go take advantage of and get that incentive. And so when there are, there's lots of proposed bills out there or regulations, and when there are proposed laws consistent with this policy, letters are prepared for the mayor's signature. And those just, those don't require council approval, they go on the agenda so people are aware of them, but they don't require any type of approval from the council.
Because they're already consistent.
Yeah, if they're consistent. If they're not consistent, or maybe we don't know, or it's a brand new thing, like we're bringing it for the council for direction, or council members can request, this is a topic we haven't thought about. I think we should, write in support of, X, Y, and Z, AB 1, 2, 3.
And that's when you're addressing it as the council, right? There's still the opportunity for council members to kind of transmit their own positions on the issue, but just clearly stating that this is the issue. This is kind of them, kind of, they're not addressing this on behalf of the council or the city. They're just an individual council member. And I think the next slide, this is really kind of what got added. I think that Councilmember, you mentioned that this was added to the as far as a code of ethics was something new, so something that's changed from the past.
And so these quotes are taken all directly from the governance manual, where there are quotes, and there's more. The governance manual has. This is a bigger section than what we're seeing here. We're not putting word for word what's up there, but we'll have this captured the sort of spirit of what is in there. That it's to serve the common good of the people of Cloverdale rather than any private or personal interest. Strive to treat all individual claims and matters with fairness and equity. Obviously, comply with the law. Maintain confidentiality of documents and the materials you may find from me or from Kevin, confidential information. And to maintain that's your obligation. What we discuss in closed session is confidential. If I send you an email, that's confidential, but the city manager may, send you confidential information, may let you know that, council, I wanted to let you know I terminated, employee X, Y, and Z, like to keep that sort of confidential information confidential. And then to support the maintenance of a positive and constructive workplace environment for city employees and for citizens and businesses dealing with the city.
I know the council, I mean, this was a big deal for the council to kind of adopt. There's a lot of jurisdictions that don't have something like this. Code of conducts, code of ethics. That's really kind of, I know that in the past, that was something that was brought up, it got pushed as far as something very important, got to put in. It was adopted, and even, I know we're running late, but there is something very important in the next few slides as far as really taking the time and to really reflect on what all of these mean. Now, we won't go into it very a lot of time here, but really when you read them, even the last point here straight out of the Code of Ethics, support and maintain the positive and constructive workplace environment for city employees for the citizens and businesses dealing with the city. Obviously, very important. The first one, serve the common good of the people of Cloverdale rather than any private or personal interest. Like those are, like when you think about those things, they seem like common sense, right? Like, of course, we should be doing this. But it's nice to kind of just put them down because it's a good reminder of kind of as an elected official, sometimes it's kind of like stepping back and just being, I'm a council member. Like this is important. You guys serve very, very important position in the city. But these points, I would just, we do a lot of kind of speaking on when folks want to do kind of the different ethics, different governance. But the city did a good job of at least kind of highlighting some important factors of what it is to be a council member, what you should strive for.
And to just elaborate on those examples that are in the governance manual of, refraining from abusive conduct, personal charges, written attacks on staff, the public, your fellow council members. There's a list of things. This isn't the whole list, but respect that it can be hard to run a meeting sometime, and sort of respecting the efforts of the presiding officer to maintain order. Practice civility in your discussions and debate. I mean, what we learned in elementary school, that's using I statements and that sort of thing. It can sound silly, but that, in a heated conversation, that can make a big difference. Avoiding personal comments that could offend others when it's not really related to the business of what the city is trying to do. Demonstrating effective problem-solving approaches. That's not always possible. It's hard. Some things are hard to solve, or two people disagree, and there's just not a gap you can bridge, and that's the way it is sometimes, and that's okay. But trying and being willing to try when it's possible, or encouraging that, at least those attempts is an important part of being an elected official. And I think most important part is, making the public feel welcome. At the end of the day, we all work for the citizens who elected us, who pay taxes, and so you don't want people to feel uncomfortable coming to their city, even if they're asking for something you can't deliver, or even if it's as simple as, typical person comes to these meetings, they may have the idea this is a New Hampshire town hall meeting where, I have a back and forth, and they don't realize in public comment that we can't really engage, and that can feel rude to them, and making sure they understand why, and that,
It's over there to criticize you for that.
To your point, Alex, on that is, obviously, we get a lot of emails in the background. I read them all, but some of them, I'm not gonna respond because it just could open a firestorm of, he said, she said. So, I just want the public to know that, yeah, I acknowledge it, I read it, but if it does have nothing to do with city businesses, I'm not engaging.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get, the public always wants you to engage, but there's stuff going on in the background. I look at some of the stuff that I get and I'm like, there's no business on what we're doing as a city council.
And when you get, when there are controversial topics, and it comes to the city council, that's a great thing to mention too. Like, I got lots and lots of emails about this. I read every single one. I didn't respond to them all. I couldn't. There's too many. But I want the public to know that I read every single email that was sent to the city council about this project. Take them all into consideration.
Because like I said, the city, I guess most of the voting public doesn't understand that, as a whole, we can't respond.
And I know that's something staff tries to do too. People will say, "Oh, when's the next meeting? Like, can I come give a comment?" And staff will say it, but we always try to let them know, this is what's going to happen. Like, the council can't act on that. Like, you can tell it, they'll know it, they'll hear it. They may ask for something in the future, but we want to set their expectations so that it doesn't seem like they were told come down at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and then they're really disappointed that there wasn't any movement.
So I have a question about this, just kind of wanted to maybe dive in a little bit regarding what would be considered a personal attack.
Uh,
I think a personal attack is really if you're, well, and again, when I got drafted, there may have been, I wasn't here when I got adopted. But the personal attacks that I've seen, like in council meetings and other council meetings, and we've seen them on TV, right? We've heard about them, is really when people start yelling at each other, calling each other names, really going after personally, you're a, and then you start fill in the blank, right? And it's going away from the really debating something. No, I don't agree. This from being more like, well, you're in again, blank, 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 right? Now it starts getting very personal attack, like, kind of that to me, that starts kind of crossing that line of now you're now it's getting a little more personal. It's going away from the business you're there to handle to now we're attacking each other as far as going away from the subject matter.
Because this was a really important part that was written into the code of conduct. I mean, especially with the beginning of the conduct of members. And something that, calling somebody a detriment to the city would be constituted as personal attack.
Yeah, it depends on the context, of what's going on. It is something, we wanna always try to work positively with your coworkers.
Having this written in the code of conduct, the question is, when this is repetitive at meetings, could that be considered repetitive harassment?
It all depends on kind of it's always the time, place, and manner, right? It depends on when it was stated, why it was stated. Is it I'm concerned about the city, this is a problem, you're causing something? Is it just something that's said, just more of an attack? But I think the facts matter.
Yeah.
On any of this, even calling each other names, and really, I think it's going into the sections really going into the personal attacks, cussing at each other, like really kind of going into kind of those types of.
So even, like you're saying, cussing, profanity, screaming on a personal context, this would be like one-on-one, maybe meeting outside of a meeting. If somebody's swearing and yelling at you, then, you let them know that that's not okay.
Well, I think that I know that this is when we're talking about this, we're like talking about the like meetings. When you're talking individual contacts, we would always, recommend to always have crucial conversations.
Yeah.
It's good to have conversations. It's good to kind of have crucial conversations with each other. Some of those maybe get heated, but always be professional.
And I just want to add, because you mentioned earlier harassment, I just want to be clear that you guys are not employees of the city. And so while these are our standards that we want to hold, and our goals for how we're all going to behave, it is not the same as
Can I stop you right there? When you say we're not employees of the city, I mean, in the view of the IRS, we got a W-2.
So yes,
that's
in the view of the IRS tax rules, you are, but I guess what I meant is, Kevin going to an employee and swearing at them might be workplace harassment. While, council members swearing at each other, it might not live up to the ideals that we're trying to set for ourselves. It doesn't necessarily it's not workplace harassment necessarily. It's not
in a legal sense,
Yeah.
right? But I think in sort of this sense of how that is perceived and how that is, that type of behavior would be considered harassment. It's repetitive.
Well, I mean, harassment carries a lot of different, the legal terms and carries a lot of different weight on it. I think Alex's point is when you're talking about employees, you're talking about employees have rights.
Yeah.
Certain rights that council members don't have under the law regarding kind of employment law. Regarding our recommendation always between council members is it's really kind of the common sense more of when you're having conversations with each other, if you're talking about private, we can only encourage. Things are going to get heated. It all depends on the fact. Were people baiting another person? Did people do something? Like all those things would get looked at, right? Again, the term harassment, I would just pause, with as far as me giving any type of real kind of legal advice, because that has a certain term in the law, both for employees and for, and just in law in general. But I think that the point of the code of conduct is you're trying to avoid the more of you're just being, whether you're engaging in these conversations, whether you're not having crucial conversations. Look, I know things get heated. I know when you have passionate people on councils that want the best thing for the city, things are gonna get a little bit heated. And I think that the code of conduct and the code of ethics, all it's trying to encourage is, can we get past that moment of conflict? Talk about things and then move forward, knowing that everybody's kind of passionate.
So one of the questions may be at a meeting, you know, we do have the presiding officer, which is the mayor. And then you have other folks, council as attorney, can speak up during certain times. So, would you have a recommendation how to move forward when some of these things may arise?
I would need to
You know,
know.
that would just be under the umbrella of professionalism, right? Just know that you're conflicting with somebody else. Know that you can agree to disagree, and then let's move forward, because you're gonna keep going, butting heads with that person. You want your voice to be heard, they want their voice to be heard, so the meeting becomes stagnant at that point. So then code of ethics is telling us to, as professionals, as elected individuals, for our constituents to agree to disagree and move forward.
So
That's,
I understand
that's a
that
great way to put it.
it falls under the responsibility of the presiding officer or possibly the attorney to move these things along when they're getting to a point.
Well,
It's
just
just-
understand
these
that
things aren't
sometimes,
quite-
like I say, that some people are, you know, really adamant and really, you know, about their point. So sometimes the level in the room needs to come down a little bit, right? And then that's where the professionalism in your role as a city council person should be respected on the dais. And you should, agree to disagree. And we should all just like, okay, we got there some, discernment between those two members, that's okay. But let's keep going with the meeting at hand. Just have to,
And I just be clear, you guys are the council members and the mayor is running the meeting. First of all, and so that's how it works. There've been times I've jumped in and said, we're having the same conversation
Mhm.
over and over again. You may wanna just move on, and sometimes the council has done that, and there have definitely been times where we just kept having that conversation. So city manager may suggest, hey, time to move on, and it's still up to the council and the mayor about whether it's time to move on or.
So that's, that's really my question is that, there is a certain point where, you taking the responsibility to, give a recommendation. And then ultimately, it's the responsibility of the presiding officer to, conduct a meeting that abides by these code of ethics.
Well,
I mean, it's everyone's responsibility to.
I think it's really, I think the code of ethics really applies to all.
Yeah.
I think we're and I think that code of ethics really kind of, like you said, applies to individuals. I think it was a great point before of kind of, we could disagree, let's move on. I think it does as far as council meetings are conducted, and we had the role of the mayor as far as folks needing to kind of respect that role as well. So that comes forward as well. I think a little, sometimes you do get kind of other individuals trying to diffuse things. But it's really kind of, I think it's really the code of ethics, it's really kind of focused on the individual. And the individual kind of also knowing, not relying on the mayor to step in.
Yeah.
But the individual knowing, okay, am I starting to cross this line?
Yeah.
Do I have to,
I think this is like kind of, that's how things work in an ideal situation that, we all have a responsibility to diffuse situations. We all have the ability to diffuse situations. What I'm really kind of trying to ask is when these things are not happening, it is just not happening. You will make a recommendation, so as the attorney can make a recommendation. But ultimately, at that point, a council member is not the presiding officer. So you can, at that point, maybe if things are not being taken care of, you call point of order.
As a council member?
Yeah.
As council members always able to say, hey, can we, look, point of order,
Yeah.
we shouldn't be discussing it this way, and we've seen it before. Then the mayor could take that as, okay, yes, let's move on.
Okay.
But as a council member, I mean, you could always say, I would want to stop discussing this. But again, I think these rules or these kind of, I almost say these goals, aspiration as well, but we always want to make sure, again, when we go back to our public's watching, staff's watching, everybody's there. How do we communicate with each other in the best professional way?
And to add to that, the way you make a point of order can be itself, just another code of conduct violation in itself for not living up to these ideals, right? Hey, point of order, we're starting to get personal. Let's all take a step back and try to focus on the topic is a lot different than saying, point of order, you violate the code of conduct, right? Those are
And you're a blank button.
right. And so like those are two different ways to approach something. One of them is very accusatory, it may itself violate some of these principles of trying to work together and practice civility and all of that. And so that's important to keep in mind as well.
Yeah.
And maybe this is important to know, code of conduct is self-enforcing by the council, right? Kevin and I, we work for you, not the other way around. And so the council is ultimately responsible for policing itself.
Yeah, there was even like on just law itself, like there was a lot of, and I read quite a bit of stories from other jurisdictions of they really want somebody like, kind of go impose this, go impose that on the council itself. But sometimes it's the council that's looking at your own conduct and saying, is this the way we want to behave as a council? So that's why you have certain rules that you've gone above and beyond, like you've gone, I won't say above and beyond, but you've gone further than what the state law has, and you've adopted your own rules. And as a council, you're saying, we want to impose these rules on each other and in order to hold ourselves accountable. And that's what I think the slide is, as far as that's why you have these options.
So, the complaint, there's a process in the governance manual for complaints of violations of the code of conduct, for the governance manual, rather. So that could be a violation of the code of conduct, it could be a violation of some other part of the manual. The manual incorporates in all these state laws, so you might say, there was a conflict of interest, Councilmember X voted on this item, I want to refer that as a code of conduct. Under our process, the city attorney will present that to the appropriate body, in this case, generally the city council, for direction on whether an investigation is necessary. Investigations are to determine facts. They're not making conclusions, right? They're determining that X or Y, not was X a violation of a policy. So in a case where there's no need to investigate the facts, there's not going to be an investigation. There may not be, and depending on the level, right? City doesn't want to spend $50,000 on investigation to see that, someone, do this minor thing one time. Like it could be handled different ways, maybe just some, counseling of talking to someone. But when also when warranted, the city attorney, I may talk with city manager, and we just do an investigation on ourselves, by ourselves unilaterally. That's usually when something involves staff, right? Because staff have these rights, we want to make sure employment laws are being complied with and that sort of thing. And we also might want it to be confidential and not having the council know about it, because this employee has, confidentiality rights as well. And so there are situations where we might just go do something on our own in that case. So the item is then presented. If there's investigation is presented to the council, and the council in sole discretion shall force the code of conduct in the term, against members depending on the extent and severity of the violation. So the council is responsible for determining whether or not there has been a violation at all. And the council, there's a whole range of options, there's informal stuff the council could do. Just through their comments at a meeting. Or recommending something, happen, or hey, this wasn't great. Let's do a training, city manager, let's do a whole council training on this. Or there's 3 formal steps in our governance manual that can be taken. An admonishment, which is sort of the lowest level, sort of a reminder to everyone that's not engaged in this type of behavior without specifically calling out someone that has violated something. The next serious one is a warning, telling someone they violated that, warning them not to do it again. And then the most severe is a censure, sort of a formal reprimand from the city council. And that can be combined with other actions, right? You could be removed from committees or not be allowed to attend events that require, reimbursement from the city or things like that. Due process is required, the individual has the right to respond to any allegations, so that would all be part of a public meeting process. Obviously, the public can comment just like they can on any agenda item and submit written stuff as well. So that's how that process works, if council ever wants to go to the censure, that's so serious that really requires sort of a second step, because our process says there's gonna be a resolution and that sort of thing, so you could take direction from council at a first meeting, they review the report, maybe council provides direction, this is so serious, we want to do a censure, come back at the next meeting for adoption of resolution, and the accused with the opportunity at both meetings that defend themselves, present their case as to why the code of conduct hasn't been violated.
And the censure really a formal statement, right, of the council. That the council voting and saying, this is not okay. This can't go on. This is a violation of our policies, of whatever it is, as a council. As the majority of the council, right? We are saying this is not okay. This is not the conduct that we're here for. So that's why it goes to the highest level, and there's a resolution, there's a process. I know that surrounding jurisdictions, you've seen it in the paper, censures. It is something that does come up at times, but like Alex said, it's kind of there's usually a process. Kind of, and in this case, the council has set a process in your governance manual and in your code of ethics, code of conduct.
And this process would always be, public in an open meeting. The governance manual talks about, closed sessions, and that might happen. Usually, again, if there's an employee involved, you might have a closed session to review maybe an unredacted report or something like that. But this step would always be in public as part of a public process.
And I think that's a great point to point out. When it has to do council kind of actions, you see that a lot. You'll see that in open session, right? That's something of the council. When it has to do with an employee, that is not obviously done in open session if an employee somehow is involved, because employees have rights, privacy, etc. Those are either done individually with the member, but we also obviously would have obligations if an employee is involved. We can't ignore things either. But that's a different process that we would need to take.
Let her know. House closed, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is just the, concluding slide. We talked about the municipal code and governance laws, our governance manual, but there's a whole lot more that governs how you operate and that sort of thing. So we're not talking about them all today, but there's a lot of rules. Your jobs are not easy, right? You gotta comply with the Brown Act, the political format, Public Records Act, right? That make it difficult to do anything, say, quote unquote, in secret. Which can be difficult and sort of building relationships and building consensus on a topic. You're note that the legislature did make themselves have to comply with these 2 rules because they see the value of sort of backdoor conversations, might have some value. But we can't have them here. Political Reform Act and conflicts of interest rules, common law conflict of interest, which is really about a requirement that you always be acting in the best interest of the city, what you think is in the best interest of the city, rather than what might be in your personal interests. Gift regulations, campaign finance rules. You got to worry about track who's giving you money and whether they have any business for the city, or whether people who are giving you campaign contributions had business before the city, in the past year or so. And then, this is a voluntary training you all did, but there, are a number of mandatory trainings you got to do on a pretty regular cycle of ethics training, anti-harassment training, and the legislature added a new one this year about sort of financial training. That is something that in the next year or two you guys are going to receive as well.
And I think the point of this slide is just to also tell you and tell the public, it's not easy, but also being a council member, right? There are many rules that apply, many regulations that apply, that folks sometimes don't think about, like the members of the public don't think that there's all these rules on top of the council. These are just kind of the ones we can name. I mean, all of them involve long trainings that we could go into. But this is just more of a reminder of it is tough. It's not as you're elected or you're on a council and now you can do whatever you want, and the laws are really there to kind of for the system to make sure that, again, everything goes back to providing the best you can provide to your residents. And I think that's why all these rules are structured there. But again, all these, you've been to the trainings, the 81-234 trainings that cover most of these, but there's a lot here for the council. So, and lastly, and we'll happy to answer questions, but I started by saying, I applaud the council. And I do applaud the council for having this kind of more of a check-in reminder of what are some of these governance rules, but also for having the rules, for adopting a governance manual, for adopting a code of conduct, code of ethics, and kind of saying, hey, look, we understand the laws here. We want to go above. We want to create our own regulations that are going to be applying to us, because at the end of the day, we're here to provide the best services for the people of Cloverdale. So that's, again, I applaud you. This is great that you guys are doing this.
And with that, we got a little overtime, but if council has any questions.
Is that billable overtime?
There you go. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
The only thing I want to bring up real quick is I think one of my key takeaways here is the goal setting. And bringing up that new council members coming on and kind of that transition with a 2-year budget, and maybe something there's actually sitting down and actually saying, here's the city's goals right here, and doing some more updates. That's my personal takeaway on that. And just, I think this was well needed, or definitely needed for the council. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Of course.
And if you want to open it up to the public.
Absolutely. Public, any questions?
I'm thinking,
Okay,
no, I don't think so.
gotcha. Thank you.
I would think that, I just noticed the censure issue up there.
Yeah.
And from the last meeting,
Mhm.
and, I guess for me, censure, it would have to almost be I just didn't get where it came from, I guess. I had a problem with that.
I don't think there'll be any crumbling over the table type stuff going on.
Do you think not? You sure?
No, or rolling over the table, whatever you want to put it.
But yeah, I was getting a little worried. The last couple of meetings have been a little distressing. And-
Agreed.
Yeah, and I've gotten a shitload of emails, phone calls about those meetings.
All of us have,
Yeah,
so. Yeah. Cool. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay. All righty, let's go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 12:13.